figured this was the perfect time to transition. I changed the lens, and you could watch me like hunch over and lean into the water and get some cool photos, and I'm sure we'll probably insert clip of me crouching in the water. But I thought it would be even more valuable and more useful to talk about what we did and show some of those additional photos so you can get a better idea of how off-camera flash and natural light stack up against each other. To get started, we're going to cruise on through and check out some of these photos that are, of course, edited by my founder's profile on Aftershoot. So they're just here, opened up, edited, happy, culled, everything looks great. And we're gonna walk through some of these photos one by one and maybe do a little bit of comparing between all three different sets. So first up, we have our natural light photo. This was the one where we turned our subjects back towards the sun. So Lorena's back is towards the sun. You could see her hair has a little bit of blown out look, but this is nice. This isn't a bad photo. This isn't something that we're really, unhappy that we created. This is a perfectly good deliverable photo. I'll show you the before because I think it's really valuable to know that we underexposed this a lot. And we did that intentionally, right? So we wanted to make sure that we didn't blow out as much as we could. And we did make sure, if we zoom in, you can see that there is still detail. So while I was photographing, I was making sure that I wasn't losing any of the dark points in the image. So I was always watching and making sure that I had detail there still. And each individual camera is obviously going to interact a little bit differently. I found that Nikon is really good at pulling back shadows, whereas older Canons, I know, definitely don't do that as well. They're better at pulling back the highlights. So kind of knowing where your camera's strengths and weaknesses are can help you shoot a little bit more effectively. But in this case, I knew I could pull back everything I needed. So this natural light photo is totally fine in this instance. We're gonna go ahead and skip over to the regular off-camera flash. So this is where we were at like F16, 1/200th of a second, ISO 100. Now again, you can see there's a lot more detail in this image. You're able to really see the water, the sand, the background. The sky wasn't super interesting at this angle. It was a little bit hazy, but if we had, say, a blue sky, you would have been able to see more of that blue in the sky. But it created a different looking image overall, right? And we could have adapted this a little bit. So for instance, when we were photographing, if I felt that it was too dark in the background, I could have tweaked down the settings a little bit, but the light on my subject is really beautiful. It's a really soft, nice light. And then we're gonna go ahead and pop on over to what it looks like when we went to high speed sync. Now the pose did change a little bit, but with high speed sync, we get the best of both worlds. So with our high speed sync image, you can see that really soft depth of field. And I'm gonna bounce back really quickly to the regular off-camera flash. I can see all of the little things in the background. I can see all the little people, and the mountain is very crisp and clear in the background. But when I go ahead and move on over to the high speed sync, because my settings were different, I was shooting at f2.8 for this shot, you can see that that depth of field, that amazing soft background is still there, and I get that beautiful soft light. Now again, there are some drawbacks to high speed sync, but I would say one of the best parts about high speed sync is that you don't really have to worry too much about settings. You really are just looking at what looks good and then the distance of the flash to your subject. So it does make getting started in off-camera flash a little bit easier, and it does create a much prettier, softer looking image. But again, there's use cases for every single one of these. And it's not to say that flash is better than natural light. It's not to say that high-speed sync is better than off-camera flash, because really both have really important use cases. And we'll show a little bit of that in a moment. So we'll go ahead and take a look at the one where our light is split. We'll do our before yet again so you can see this natural light shot. I'm exposing for the highlights. This image here is something that maybe I could give to a friend, right? But I'm not gonna give it to my clients. The contrast in the light, when it's split down her face, it's not a very high quality image. The shadows aren't speaking properly, so to speak, right? We're not using shadow intentionally here. We're just at a bad angle on this photo. And I'll actually just flip on to the next image with natural light, where I did turn her towards the sun. And this works, the shadow's in the right place. She's soaking up the sun. Again, can't look at the sun, but looking in the general direction with the eyes closed. It's a nice shot to have. It works with natural light, and you can absolutely play with natural light and the harsh values of light pretty easily. And we're gonna go one more and just show what happens when she's looking away from that sunlight. You can see she's in shadow. She has some weird lines on her nose. Everything's kind of just not great, right? Again, another image that I'm not going to, I honestly probably wouldn't even give this to a friend just because like it highlights the nose in bad ways, right? So it's just not a solid image. Now we're gonna bounce over to what happens when we shoot all the way to F18 and do that off-camera flash. Now I've darkened the background in this using the flash. One of the things that happens when you start incorporating flash is that you do have to pay attention to the overall look of the image. We created a really stylized look where we've darkened the background and really made our subject pop in this version of the image. Now we are at F18, so you can see there in the background there's a very, very solid van. You know, it's very visible what's behind our subject, so not the best use. A high-speed sync is going to look a little bit better for sure. We'll be able to soften that background by shooting at f2.8. Now we'll go ahead and look at what happens when she looks towards the sun. Now you can see there is sunlight on her, right? We are still photographing the sun, but our light has now turned into the main light. We're just using the sun as a fill light, so to speak, and our light is becoming the prominent light source. So again, it's very, very apparent here that the sun is there, it's on her hair. This is taken moments apart from when we were using the natural light looking directly into the sun, but we've really created a different look and drawn the light to our subject. Now, when she looks towards the flash, this is where we really see the value of it. So if we were in an instance where we really wanted our subject to have a certain background and there was a lot of sunlight beaming down on our subject from that direction, we could always play it just like this and totally change how everything looks. So it gives us the ability to photograph in any direction and not have to worry about what's happening with the sun where we are. So this pose works really well because she's turned towards the light, and even though the light was really terrible, as we saw when we did the natural light version, this is a much more deliverable version of that photo. Now we are gonna dive into the high-speed sync. So again, this is where things really look awesome. This is such a cool place to be. One thing to notice, and I'm gonna bounce right back to the other shot here. So one thing to notice here, my flash now has to be closer. Because remember, we were talking, we're at 1:1 power. It's full power on the flash, so if I need the flash to be brighter to compensate for, say, the really bright sun, my only option is to move that flash closer. So here you can see there's probably about 24 inches away from our subject, but when we go to our high-speed sync version, you're gonna notice that it's only about 12 inches away. We really closed in to be able to harness the full power because, again, when you're using high-speed sync, the flash is bursting out little pops of light, so you have less power behind it, so you will need it to be a little bit closer to your subject. Now this image looks so awesome, and I chose this one in particular because I wanted to showcase it. Aftershoot chose one where there was a cleaner background, but I went in and swapped it out because I wanted to showcase the subjects behind it. So people walked into our shot, and because we're on high-speed sync shooting at 2.8, that van that we saw before, can't tell there's a van there. Those people, they're still there. You can tell there's people there, but if this was the F16, F18 version, they'd be pretty sharp. Even at the 125 millimeter focal length that we were shooting at, they would be pretty sharp, but in this case, because we're at 2.8, we really have that fall off. So again, a huge advantage to the high-speed sync here, a really valuable tool to have in your pocket. This one I love because, again, we balanced out the light a little bit more. So in our off-camera flash version, we really honed in and made the light the key source, which is something that we could have corrected, right? So if we reduced our aperture, we could have brought in more available light. But in this case, I just wanted to show some different techniques and different way to use the light. So that's why we went with the really dramatic, overly flashy look. And then when we went to the high-speed sync one, we made sure to balance it out a little bit more so that you can see the background's not darkened. We're just putting a prettier light on our subject. Now, when our subject looks towards the sunlight in this case, we've now eliminated the shadows. So we'll bounce back to the natural light version really quick just to show you. There's a lot of shadow on the side of her face here, on her hair. We lose a lot of that detail. It is still a nice look and I love it, but if I were looking to show off all parts of this image, having the flash here to fill that in really makes a nice balanced image for us where the hair has light on it, the shadow has light on it, so there's not really any deep dark shadows in this version of the image. And of course, when she turns towards the light, we get that same amazing effect. This is light that we can love, unlike the natural light version. So we're using the sun coming from behind her as that kind of key light. It's splashing on her hair, the back of her arm, but the main light that's hitting her face is our flash just off to the side. Now I want to talk about the parts that were really boring where I was crouching in the water and you weren't really going to learn much by watching me do it, but rather seeing the final result. So the first thing I did was I said, I want to put my subject in the worst possible place. So I put Lorena right next to where the sun is beaming down. This is going to be a use case where you're not going to be able to probably do anything about it. And I wanted to showcase that even with such powerful tools like off-camera flash in your pocket, you are still limited by the technicalities of your equipment. So this was our natural light shot. There's nothing I can do with it. I tried all different exposures and all I get is a big burst of lens flare from the sun bouncing off the water behind our subject. So there really wasn't anything I was able to do with this image with natural light because the sun was so powerful. It was just high enough that it was hitting the water and just blowing out everything in the camera. And then I'm gonna show you the regular traditional off-camera flash. So this we're shooting at f/22. I turned it all the way down. It's ISO 100, f/22. I tried to shut out as much natural light as I could. Now in this case, we do have a subject. We still have that blast of light that is coming off of the water. Nothing I can do about shooting directly into such a bright light source, but at least I have something with my subject. So in the case where my back is up against the wall and I have nothing to do, this was a really valuable tool. It really gave me the ability to do something out of nothing. Now we'll go to our high-speed sync image. And our high-speed sync image, again, that same glare issue, right? So there's just nothing you can do about having the sunlight reflecting directly into your lens. You're going to get that haze. But in this case, we have just yet another very similar image where at least I have some light on my subject. There's something there. It's not a stellar image, not something I'm super happy or proud to be showcasing, but I managed to salvage a really bad situation. And that's one of the really important things about flash is that when you're in just the worst of worst conditions, at least you're able to make something out of nothing. Now we're on to the one where I'm crouching in the water, I'm on a 24mm lens, I'm nice and low, and I'm shooting up towards my subject. This is an image that I'm happy with, right? As a photographer, I like it. There's water, there's sky, it's blown out sky and blown out water, but you can tell she's in the water, the light on her is nice and soft, the sun is behind her. So again, it just creates a nice, happy mood, a nice environment, a nice vibe. But then I run into the problem, which is I'm at a beautiful location, but it kind of doesn't look like a beautiful location. You can't really tell what the water is. You don't have a good idea of what's behind her. There's some buildings and some trees and a little bit of mountain, and the sky is just kind of dead. Right, and this is a place that a lot of times we see images that we're shooting with natural light and you just don't get a real sense of the environment. This is the perfect example of why I love to include a little bit of off-camera flash. So this is going to be our traditional off-camera flash image. As you can see, we've gone to f/22. It's ISO 100, 1/200th of a second. And I'm still nice and low in the water. I changed the pose a little bit for this one so that I could get her pointed towards the flash. I didn't want to make my assistant go deep into the water here. So she's only about ankle deep and my assistant's barely in the water at all, just barely covering her shoes. So I have that flash aimed down, putting a nice, beautiful light on my subject. So my eye is really drawn to my subject. The white buildings in the background are now a lot darker. They're not a focal point anymore as much as the sky and the water have become. So they now become that dark band across in the background. We've brought back the sky that we lost in the natural light image. So again, we've really changed the look. We've incorporated the environment that our subject is in a lot better by having the flash. Now this is a balancing game. You may be in a situation where you have a brilliant sky and you're going to incorporate off-camera flash, and you may lose the buildings in the background or the trees, and they may just be totally black. But if your focus is the sky, it's all about how you're composing that image and making sure that you're making it look the way you want to by using that off-camera flash. So again, this is a traditional style shot for me. I do this on a lot of my weddings. I love to really showcase everything. They paid a lot for their venue. If you're lucky, you get a beautiful sky. You want to just showcase the day, and this is a great way to stand out. It's such an easy image to create. Again, we just launched up. We were shooting directly into the sun, so F22, ISO 100, 1/200th of a second. The flash is at 1:1, and I just position it where it's closest to my subject, and it kind of balances out with my subject. And it just creates a beautiful image that I'm really proud to share. Now, I also shot it in vertical just to showcase what happens to the water. So the water now isn't as bright, right? We've incorporated the flash. We're now exposing for the sun. You can even see some of the sunburst kind of poking out of the sun behind the buildings over here. So we have a really cool, beautiful image, but the water is now really dark. And if we go back to our natural light image, you're gonna notice that the water, you can kind of see it a little bit. I mean, it's too bright, and it's a balancing game. So if my attention was really focused on the water and I wanted to showcase the water and maybe less of the sky, I wouldn't go as low with the camera. I would stand up more and shoot more directly down towards the water. And I would still incorporate a little bit of flash, but I'd use a lot less of it. And that's because I want to showcase the water, so I'm going to be focusing on exposing for the water in that case. We didn't do it in this circumstance just because the water was very shallow and kind of clear and not super interesting. It wasn't like white sand or anything. It was just kind of blah. So it wasn't important to me as much as it was to see the sunlight behind her. Now we're going to pop on over to the last two images, and this is our high-speed sync version of the same images. You'll notice the sun is no longer as defined. It's kind of just a big white blob in the sky because we're shooting at, yet again, f2.8, right? So it's 1/4000th of a second. We cranked our shutter all the way up to kind of reduce all of the light that we could get in. We kept our light in a very similar position, but now we have that really shallow depth of field. So the buildings in the background are a little less sharp. The people in the background are a little less sharp. Our subject is tack sharp. And this is a really cool feature about high-speed sync, is that there's just that little line of focus where our subject is, even at 24 millimeters, a relatively wide angle, we're still getting that really shallow depth of field on the photo. So again, just creating a different look. I personally, in this circumstance, would prefer the high-speed sync version over the traditional off-camera flash version because I don't necessarily want that much depth of field in this case, but I do like that the sky is a little bit darker, but again, the sun isn't as valuable in this one. If it was higher in the sky and I could get the sunburst, I would much prefer the off-camera flash version. But this is something that you're going to learn and you're going to play with. So as you start going out and experimenting, start learning how to change your flash settings to be from high-speed sync to regular off-camera flash, and start playing a little bit. Bring out a flash, and it could be with friends or family or dogs or anything you want, and start really playing around with it and understanding which version of flash you like better and what the drawbacks are to each of them. Now again, we decided to do that vertical shot. Love this photo. The shallow depth of field really pops when we're in this vertical position. But again, the water is just kind of dark and lost. If I did want to incorporate more of the water, I could slow down my shutter speed, which would bring up the exposure of the water. But again, we'd lose any of the blueness in the sky by doing that because there's barely any blue in this composition. So with the high-speed sync at 1/4000th of a second, we're really just at the edge of blue, whereas with the traditional off-camera flash, we get a much deeper blue. We can see a lot more of the orange as it transitions into that hazy background. I hope I gave you some confidence to pick up the flash and that you may have learned some tips or tricks from this video. We do plan on making more of them, so drop in the comments more things that you want to learn from photography or any questions you have about this video, and maybe we can make a follow-up to it. Thank you for tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe because we have tons more coming, and we want to help you improve your photography skills. Thanks for watching.